This podcast was produced using artificial intelligence and refined by human editors.
Hello, travelers. Welcome aboard Travel with Lara and Luca. Buckle up because today's destination is none other than the vibrant, vivid Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, Luca, when you say Rio, my heart does a little Samba dance, and I can't help but think of sun-kissed beaches and the echo of soccer cheers.
And what an echo it is, Lara. The city is just pulsing with life, rhythm, and a love for football that's unmatched. But hey, we chose Rio for so much more than that, didn't we?
Absolutely, we did. There's the culture, the landscapes, and the heart and soul of the people. There's a reason they call it the Ciudad Maravillosa, the marvelous city.
Can you believe we're going to cover sights, food, hidden gems, and so much more in today's show without a single break? No commercials, just us and the alluring allure of Rio.
It's going to be a jam-packed episode, and our listeners will need to keep up with us. But before we dive in, Luca, what's the most memorable thing you've done in Rio?
How could I forget? I once tried to order a cup of coffee and accidentally ended up in a spontaneous street samba circle. Turns out, uma xícara de café and vamos dançar don't sound as similar as I thought.
That's the Luca I know, always finding the beat, even in a coffee order. Well, my story's more of a mountain tale. I went hiking up to the Christ the Redeemer statue, and halfway there, a friendly capuchin monkey decided to escort me all the way to the top. I swear it was giving me a tour.
Your very own monkey guide. That's classic Lara. All right, let's steer this ship towards our first landmark. I bet you're itching to share some of the iconic sights of Rio, aren't you?
You know me too well. So shall we head to those sun-drenched wonders and unravel the splendors that await?
All right, travelers, it's time to talk about the iconic sights of Rio de Janeiro. There's no way we could start this list without mentioning the one, the only, Christ the Redeemer.
Oh, definitely. Standing tall on the Corcovado Mountain, this statue isn't just a symbol of Rio, it's practically a beckoning sign for travelers worldwide. But have I ever told you about the tiny chapel at its base?
No, I think that gem has somehow escaped our tales. You mean there's more to it than just the outstretched arms?
Precisely. It can actually hold about 100 people, and weddings there must be, I guess, quite literally heavenly.
Bet they're just praying for good weather, though. Speaking of height, we can't forget the breathtaking views from Sugarloaf Mountain.
Oh, the cable car ride there is an experience in itself. Did you know it dates back to 1912? Just imagine the flapper dresses and suits on those who first rode it.
Classic Rio glamour. But let's not forget the modern-day thrill. Sunset from Sugarloaf is still a hot debate. When do you say is the best time to go, Lara?
Oh, clearly sunset. You watch the city light up like a galaxy falling to Earth. Dusk is when Rio truly shines, Luca.
I'll play devil's advocate here and say sunrise. No crowds, cool air, and you get that first golden light over the city. It's like Mother Nature's own version of the Copacabana.
Speaking of Copacabana and Ipanema, Rio's beaches are more than just sand and sea. They're a lifestyle.
You're not kidding. Remember that impromptu beach soccer game I was pulled into at Copacabana? Let's just say I learned that just a friendly match in Rio means playing like you're fighting for the World Cup.
Oh, I was taking photos. People were gathering, assuming some celebrity was playing. They were so disappointed to find it was just you trying to score.
Ouch. I'll remember that one. Hey, talking about the celebrity status, what about the Celeron stairs in Lapa? That's some serious star power in tiles form.
Definitely. Did you know that every time Jorge Celeron saw a place he visited represented in the tiles, he would feel compelled to travel again? Rio never ceases to inspire wanderlust.
So what you're saying is, if I break a plate from my kitchen and stick it onto the steps, I'll have a valid excuse to go globetrotting.
Exactly that, Luca. If your kitchenware is travel-worthy. Now, from the vibrant world of tiles, let's give our listeners a taste of what we have next, the delicious cuisine of Rio.
Okay, Lara, after admiring the awe-inspiring sights of Rio, it's about time we talked about one of my favorite topics, the food. Delicious cuisine coming right up.
Brazilian cuisine. It's impossible not to talk about Rio without salivating over the thought of Feijoada. Luca, please tell our listeners why this dish is the heartbeat of Brazilian culinary culture.
Feijoada, the Brazilian national dish, is a stew that's as rich in flavor as Rio's culture is in color. Picture this: black beans slow-cooked with a variety of meats like pork ribs, smoked sausages, and brisket. It's smoky, it's savory, and every spoonful is a symphony of tastes and textures.
As delectable as it is, feijoada isn't just about taste. It's a dish with deep historical roots. Isn't that right?
Yes, it dates back to the times of slavery, when slaves would prepare the dish using leftover cuts of meat from their masters' tables, cooking it with black beans, which were abundant in Brazil. Today's feijoada, though, is a refined rendition that brings families together, usually enjoyed on Wednesdays and Saturdays.
And it's a heavy meal, right? There's a whole ritual to eating it properly and then taking what I call the feijoada nap afterwards.
Oh, absolutely. You need to pace yourself. I have this rule for eating feijoada: no immediate plans post-lunch. Just embrace the food coma that's sure to follow this hearty meal.
Can't argue with that survival tip. But the festivity in Brazilian food doesn't stop there. Let's talk about street food, pastels and tapioca. Remember our street food challenge?
How could I forget? We sought out the best pastel, a crispy, deep-fried pastry filled with cheese, meat, or shrimp. Mine was so full of heart, it leaked cheese love with every bite.
And then there was the great tapioca debacle, where we tried those delicious gluten-free crepes made from cassava flour, which are amazingly versatile, right? I mean, you can fill them with anything from cheese to coconut.
Versatile, and yet so contentious. We still disagree about what makes the perfect tapioca filling. I say cheese and guava paste. You argue for banana and cinnamon.
Because banana and cinnamon are a divine combination, Luca. But let's not get distracted by our eternal filling feud. There's more to Brazilian cuisine. The famous Brazilian barbecue, or churrasco.
Churrasco is an art form in itself. Imagine succulent cuts of beef, pork, lamb, and chicken, all seasoned to perfection and grilled over a charcoaled pit. It's a carnivore's dream, Lara. And the picanha, that's a slice of heaven right there.
Your enthusiasm for meat might need its own podcast, Luca, but you're right. One thing I love about churrasco is the way it's served at Brazilian steakhouses, brought to the table on massive skewers, sliced and served one tender piece at a time.
Speaking of tender moments, nothing completes a Brazilian meal like a caipirinha, the national cocktail made from cachaça, sugar, and lime.
Oh, Luca, remember that time in Ipanema when we took that caipirinha making class? It was meant to teach us the subtleties of making this iconic drink, but it turned into a samba dance party before we even finished our cocktails.
Indeed, the Caipirinha truly embodies the spirit of Rio. It's like holding a carnival in your hand. But for listeners thinking about sweet treats, don't forget about the chocolate truffles, or brigadeiros, as they're lovingly called in Brazil.
Brigadeiros are an institution in themselves. Imagine rich, chocolatey balls rolled in sprinkles. I must confess, I once ate a dozen in one sitting. They're so addictive.
Addiction might be an understatement, Lara. Whenever I'm back from Rio, my suitcase is half clothes, half brigadeiros. And trust me, they make wonderful gifts, though I mostly gift myself.
True, nothing says, I've been thinking about you like a box of delicious truffles. Or I've been thinking about myself in your case. But before our audience gets too hungry, I think we need to move on from cuisine.
You're right. Up next is something equally appetizing for the soul. In the next segment, we'll unearth the hidden gems of Rio de Janeiro. I'm not talking about diamonds or gold, but places and experiences that sparkle just as brightly.
Places that even some cariocas might not know about. So stay tuned as we reveal the secrets that make this marvelous city truly unforgettable.
Segment 3, Hidden Gems. So we've soaked in the sun at the iconic beaches, danced through the night in Lapa, and gazed down upon this marvelous city from Christ the Redeemer himself. Now let's wander off the beaten path and dive into Rio's hidden gems.
The unseen treasures. Let's begin our journey in the heart of creativity, the Santa Teresa neighborhood. This place, Luca, with its winding streets and hilltop views, it's like stepping into an artist's daydream.
Absolutely, Lara. Last time I was there, I stumbled upon this tiny studio, I swear it was as if I had discovered a portal to a vintage Rio, each piece telling its own story.
Ah, the stories. I remember Santa Teresa at night, filled with the hum of bossa nova drifting from every bar. That music-filled evening we had, do you remember? The air was electric, with passion and poetry.
How could I forget? I even attempted to play the tambourine. Emphasis on attempted. But it's those impromptu moments that truly reveal Rio's soul.
And speaking of the soul, Luca, tell me about that tour you took, the one you said gave you the real Rio experience.
Oh, that was something different. It wasn't about the landmarks. It was about the people, the communities. The guide was a local, born and raised, and the respect he had for the place, that was the real gem.
These untold narratives, they're what transform a trip into a pilgrimage, don't you think?
Couldn't have said it better. Another oft-missed wonder is Rio's unusual museums. Not just art and history. I'm talking quirky, off-the-wall collections you'd never expect.
Did you ever visit the Catete Palace? Oh, what a place. It's not just about the exhibits. It's the entire history-soaked ambiance of the former presidential mansion.
And then there's the Museum of Tomorrow. An odd name for a museum, don't you think? But it's like a spaceship landed right in the middle of the city. Even if you're not a science buff, the architecture alone is worth the trip.
Speaking of trips, shall we touch upon the ever-vibrant street art scene? That's where you met that renowned street artist. What was his name again?
It was Paulo. I watched him as he turned a bland wall into a manifesto of color right before my eyes. And the whimsical angles he used, it felt like a piece of Rio's soul etched into the city itself.
The way art can ignite change, incredible. I saw a favela once, its walls a canvas for expression, painted so vividly it seemed to sing with hope.
Art, much like Rio, doesn't whisper. It shouts, it sings, it dances. And speaking of, there's this one place that might surprise you, Lara, the Garden of Painsworthy.
Painsworthy? That's a name both daunting and inviting, begging you to uncover its story.
Rumor has it the garden was named after an English lord so bewitched by Rio that he named the garden after the pain of leaving it. Whether it's true or not, the name stuck.
A bewitching pain, what a beautifully somber way to describe the feeling of leaving Rio. And yet, even as we discuss these hidden spots in the city, there are places awaiting that your heart must see. Right, Luca?
Right you are, and soon we'll share more about those must-see places. But before that, we have a few more Rio peculiarities to unfold. Stick around, as next up, we'll get a bit quirky with some weird facts about this city that even the locals might not know.
Must-see places in Rio. I mean, where do we even start, Luca?
What better place than the Lapa neighborhood? It's the soul of the night in Rio. The Samba, the Caipirinhas, and of course, those iconic arches.
The Lapa arches are an aqueduct turned tramway, right? And now a symbol of the city. But for me, Lapa's about the energy. The street parties. Remember that one time we literally danced until the sun came up?
How could I forget? The Samba rhythm is infectious. Though I'm surprised the arches were still standing after holding up all that vibrant Rio nightlife.
They've been standing since the 1700s, Luca. If they can survive that long, they can survive a few Samba shuffles from us.
Fair point. Moving from a man-made marvel to a sporting cathedral, the Maracanã Stadium. I swear the first time I walked in there and saw the pitch, I got chills.
The energy there is palpable. It's not just a stadium, it's a temple of football. Every match feels like a festival, a carnival. Except, of course, that the carnival's chanting for goals instead of samba beats.
You know, I've always wondered how much it dwarfs the Roman Colosseum. It's like the modern-day arena of gladiators, but with football stars.
Luca comparing footballers to gladiators, I should have seen that one coming. Anyway, if stadiums aren't your thing, maybe a lush oasis in the middle of the city is. Rio's botanical garden, Jardim Botanico, is simply enchanting.
That it is. You stroll through there, and you're walking among a living library of Brazil's flora. And did you know there are species there that date back to the garden's founding in the early 19th century?
Yeah, it's like a horticultural time capsule. But tell me, Luca, did you find the Garden of Eden in there? Or did you spend more time chasing butterflies?
Hardy har har. I might have gotten a little sidetracked by the orchids. They have over 600 species.
From green havens to green peaks, let's not forget about Tijuca National Park. It doesn't get more must-see than the world's largest urban rainforest, right?
True. It's a treasure trove for nature lovers and hikers alike. I remember trekking up to the Pico de Tijuca. That view over Rio is unrivaled.
I recall you being more distracted by the small monkeys than the view. Weren't you convinced one of them took a shine to your backpack?
You try keeping your cool when a troop of mischievous monkeys decides you're their new best friend. But you know, that's nothing compared to the human aspect of Rio. A must-see, the Santa Marta favela. It's vibrant, full of life, and it's where Michael Jackson filmed They Don't Care About Us.
Yes, the community there has really transformed the area into a colorful tapestry. The murals and art installations. It's a place that's faced challenges, but the heart and soul of the people there is just inspiring.
They even have that iconic Michael Jackson statue as a reminder of his visit. Goes to show how interconnected the global pop culture is with this beautiful city.
Speaking of the beautiful city, we're headed into some seriously weird facts next. I'm excited to share these oddities with our listeners.
Oh, the weird and the wonderful. Brace yourselves, everyone. Rio's about to get a whole lot more intriguing. All right, folks, we're diving into the wacky world of weird facts about Rio. Lou, didn't you tell me once that Rio was originally named by mistake?
Yes, the story goes that the Portuguese navigators mistook Guanabara Bay for a river, calling it Rio de Janeiro, which means January River, even though there's no river there at all.
You'd think they'd have double-checked their facts before naming a place. But hey, if not for that blunder, we might not have the catchy name Rio de Janeiro.
Speaking of catching, have you ever caught the fact that Rio might actually be the birthplace of hang gliding, Luca?
Sort of. Legend has it that in the 1800s, a certain Austrian flight pioneer jumped off a hill in Rio with his glider. Whether it's the true origin is hotly debated, but imagine gliding over Rio back then, with none of the cityscape we know today.
Almost as mesmerizing as Copacabana's black and white wave-patterned Portuguese pavement. It was actually inspired by the sidewalks in Lisbon.
Hypnotizing, right? I once got so engrossed in the design that I nearly walked into a lamppost. I believe the word you're looking for is graceful, my dear Luca. Graceful or klutzy. It's all perspective. Just like Burle Marx, the landscape artist, did you know he designed park landscapes with patterns only visible from high above?
That's our Roberto Burle Marx. There's a rumor suggesting some patterns mimic indigenous art, or perhaps something even more secretive.
Ooh, a mystery in the greenery. Now what about the story of the little princess statue in Largo do Boticario?
It's shrouded in mystery. Some say it's dedicated to a noble child. Others suggest it's commemorating a young girl's tragic fate from long ago.
Whenever I pass by, I can't help but wonder what secrets it holds. Rio is full of these inexplicable oddities, isn't it?
It is. And now for something with a bit more historical gravitas, shall we skip over to our next segment on history?
Welcome back to Travel with Lara and Luca, where we're peeling back the vibrant layers of Rio de Janeiro's history.
Rio's story isn't just about beautiful landscapes and beaches, it's also a tapestry woven from the lives and cultures of diverse peoples.
True, Lara. And that story begins with the indigenous populations like the Tupi, Puri, Botocudo, and Maxicali, who originally inhabited the land.
Their connection with the land and the water shaped Rio, even giving the city its name, Rio de Janeiro, January's river. Though there's a funny story about that we'll get to later.
Then came the age of exploration. The Portuguese landed, claiming the territory for their crown in the early 16th century, and Rio de Janeiro was founded in 1565 by the Portuguese knight Estácio de Sá.
Yes, the Portuguese influence is still so visible, from the architecture right down to the cobblestone streets of Santa Teresa and beyond.
It's incredible to think about the transformation from a colonial town to a capital city of the viceregal court. By 1808, the Portuguese royal family moved the court to Rio, fleeing Napoleon's invasion.
The plot thickens. The influence of the royal family turned Rio into a cultural hub almost overnight. royal parties, new libraries, botanical gardens.
Speaking of, did you know the Rio de Janeiro Botanical Garden was founded by the order of Prince Regent John in 1808 for the acclimatization of spices like nutmeg and pepper that were brought from the West Indies?
That's a spicy bit of info, Luca. The city was also chosen as the capital of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves, and it's where Brazil's independence was later declared in 1822.
And let's not forget Emperor Pedro II, who was a big patron of the sciences and the arts. His reign brought a lot of prosperity and growth to Rio.
Too true. But Imperial Brazil came to an end with a military coup, leading to the establishment of the first Brazilian Republic in 1889.
Those were tumultuous times, with Rio at the forefront of modernization and social changes that included the abolition of slavery in 1888. Brazil was the last country in the Western world to abolish it.
With the Republic came a brand new capital for Rio. The city was now opening its arms to the future, echoing that famous statue on the Corcovado Mountain, Christ the Redeemer.
Rio just kept growing, welcoming an influx of immigrants who all added to the city's rich tapestry. By the 20th century, it was already a melting pot of cultures.
The fusion of European, African, and indigenous influences gave rise to samba, bossa nova, and of course Rio's unrivaled carnival celebrations.
But it wasn't all glitz and glamour. The city has had its share of political struggles, including the Vargas era and the subsequent military regime from 1964 to 1985.
A dark period for Brazil indeed, with censorship, repression, and resistance. But through all of this, Rio never lost its soul, constantly ebbing and flowing like the tide of its famous beaches.
Today, Rio's history manifests itself in every vibrant corner of the city, from the music that fills the air to the monuments that mark the streets.
And let's not forget the people, Luca. Cariocas, who carry the city's dynamic history in their blood and in their vibrant way of life.
The city's past has indeed shaped the wonderfully welcoming and tenacious spirit of its people, something every traveler to Rio will feel intimately.
That's our dive into Rio's rich past. But don't just live in history's grand sweep. A savvy traveler needs to know how to navigate the city today.
That's right, Lara. In our next segment, we're sharing those coveted expert travel tips. You'll want to tune in for the need to know to make the most of your visit to Rio.
Welcome back, you intrepid globetrotters. You're listening to Travel with Lara and Luca, and now it's time to get savvy with some expert travel tips for when you're roaming the sun-drenched streets of Rio de Janeiro.
And oh, are these tips golden? Starting with the best times to roll into Rio. Lara, when do you think is the prime season to samba your way into the city?
Oh, without a doubt, Luca. Carnival season is spectacular. The energy is electric. But if you're not much for crowds, I'd say between December and March. It's summer down there, perfect beach weather, and the city is alive.
Aha, but let me counter that with a secret tip. Visit in November or April. You'll dodge the peak tourist times, enjoy delightful weather, and the rates for accommodations might just be kinder to your wallet.
True, but no matter when you visit, being street smart is key. Rio is vibrant, but pickpocketing and petty theft do happen. Always be mindful of your belongings, especially on crowded beaches or at big events.
And speaking of street smarts, some of those tourist traps can really take you for a ride, figuratively and literally. Remember that time we got charged triple the fare by a taxi cab?
Only too well. Ensure the meter's running or agree on a fare beforehand. And remember, using apps for ride-sharing can often be safer and more transparent with pricing.
How about getting around Rio on your own 2 feet? When is walking a good idea, and when is it not?
You know, I love walking around the Lapa neighborhood or along Copacabana's promenade, but wandering into unfamiliar neighborhoods, especially after dark, can be risky. Always ask your hotel or local friends which areas are safe to explore.
And the metro is a great option during the day. It's clean, efficient, and often the fastest way to cut through the traffic chaos.
On to another kind of chaos, languages. While you'll find English widely spoken in tourist-heavy spots, knowing a bit of Portuguese can be a game changer.
Absolutely. Even just obrigado and por favor, that's thank you and please. It'll open hearts and doors alike.
And if you're really up for it, throw in a tudo bem. That's how are you? You'll surprise and delight the locals with your effort.
I'm going to add a tip about bargaining and haggling. It's not something that's common in most stores, but in markets or beachfront stalls, a little bit of playful bargaining can be part of the experience.
Just remember to keep it friendly. It's more about a mutual respect than driving a hard bargain.
Now let's touch on cultural etiquette. Brazil is a warm, friendly place, but it's good form to show respect. For instance, a kiss on the cheek is a common greeting, isn't it, Lara?
Right? Usually just one kiss on the right cheek among women and between men and women. Men usually give each other a pat on the back. But hey, respect personal space and follow the other person's lead.
And if you get invited to a Brazilian's home, it is polite to bring a little something, like sweets or flowers. Not wine, though. That's not a standard host gift here.
Unless you know they're a connoisseur. Oh, and here's a tip from personal experience. If you're offered a meal or drink, accept it. It's polite, and honestly, you're in for a culinary treat anyhow.
And let's not forget about those spontaneous samba circles that spring up. If you're invited to dance, do it. It's all part of the fun.
Last tip, timing. Things in Brazil might not happen as punctually as some are accustomed to.
True, if someone says, "I'll meet you at noon," they might mean sometime after lunch. It's called horário brasileiro, Brazilian time. So relax and go with the flow. You're on vacation after all.
And that's a wrap on our expert travel tips for while you're living that carioca life. Next up, we are grabbing our virtual backpacks and leading you out of the city. Ever heard of Búzios or Ilha Grande?
Oh, we've got some delightful side excursions lined up. You won't want to miss where we're heading next. Stay tuned for some stunning suggestions that might just have you extending that trip to Rio. Welcome back, folks. Last we took you through quirky, fact-filled histories, and now we're guiding you beyond the Rio hustle to the realms of tranquility and charm on some side excursions you just can't miss. Luca, I think everyone needs a little hiatus from the city's excitement at some point, don't you think? Absolutely, Lara. The city is vibrant, but sometimes you find magic in the stillness or, well, in a different kind of bustle. And what better place to start than Búzios? Ah, Búzios, the Saint-Tropez of Brazil. Brigitte Bardot loved it in the 60s, and guess what? It hasn't lost its charm. It's that cobblestoned Rua das Pedras, Lara, lining this street with oceanfront dining, lively bars, and chic boutiques. How does that not scream getaway? And not to mention the water itself, Luca. Crystal clear for diving, gentle waves for a quiet swim, and just a haven for the soul. For a moment there, Lara, you almost had me trading my microphone for a pair of flippers. Not a bad trade on some days. But if you want something a little cooler, shall we say, how about a trip to the imperial city? Metropolis, the summer retreat for the last emperor of Brazil. It's like stepping back in time with all those museums and palaces, the works. Yes, and the air there, Luca, it's like someone mixed a bit of Europe into Brazil's cocktail. I'd drink to that. But what about the lush gardens of the Imperial Museum? That's where you can literally walk the same path as Dom Pedro II once did. Quite the stroll, eh? I dare say I felt quite royal. But let's drift off the royal path to somewhere even more serene, Ilha Grande. You remember, Luca, the place where you had your Tom Hanks castaway moments? I'll never live that down. But you're right, Ilha Grande's beaches are a sanctuary from the world. Perfect for the adventurous souls looking to hike through the Atlantic rainforest, or for those like me who prefer a simple hammock and book by the sea. Now that's bliss. You're all about the balance, aren't you, Lara? And speaking of balance, how about balancing that leisure with a touch of historical architecture in Paraty? A colonial town preserved in time. I absolutely love it. The colorful buildings, art galleries, and craft stores amid streets that tell a tale at each turn. Tell them about the high tides, Luca. Ah, the flooded streets, of course, folks. Once or twice a month, the tides rise to create a mirror effect along the historic center's streets. It's otherworldly. You do have a flair for the dramatic, Luca. But with all that said, don't you think it's time we wake our listeners from the dreamy side excursions and bring them back? Indeed, but like all good dreams, Lara, we want to keep them lingering just a bit longer. And linger they shall, with stories and insights that can transform a trip into an epic. But what's coming up next, Luca? We're about to round off our Rio journey with some final thoughts that will have you booking your next adventure or reminiscing about past travels. Stay with us as we wrap things up. You won't want to miss it. Alrighty, adventurers and armchair travelers alike, as our Rio de Janeiro escapade draws to a close, let's take a few moments to reminisce about today's journey and the city that pulses with the heart of Samba. What's your standout moment from today, Lara?
It's tough to pick just one, Luca. But if I must, swirling atop Sugarloaf Mountain as the sun dipped beneath the horizon was pure magic. The city's lights flickering to life like a scattered constellation. That's hard to beat. What about you?
For me, it has to be when we shared the tale of Rio's misnamed history. I mean, who wouldn't love to accidentally name a city January River when there's actually no river at all? Only in Rio, my friends.
Such a whimsical error, yet it's stuck for centuries. It shows how human and endearing the city's story really is. Speaking of stories, Luca, have you got a personal takeaway to share about our beloved Rio?
Rio, oh Rio. This city teaches you to move with the rhythm, doesn't it? Whether it's the literal beat of the drum or the ebbs and flows of city life, Rio reminds me that there's beauty in fluidity, in adapting to the rhythm around you.
So beautifully put, Luca. I'm impressed. For me, Rio embodies resilience. Through history's twists and turns, from royal capital to a republic's birthplace, the city has reinvented itself but never lost its soul. Vivacious and vibrant, it stands as a testament to the spirit of its people.
And let's not forget to invite our listeners to share their take on Rio. If you've been here or are planning to be, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Send them in or join the conversation over at our socials. What's on deck for next week, Lara?
Oh, next week we've got another fascinating locale up our sleeves, but let's not spoil the fun by revealing too much just yet. Let's just say it's a place where history whispers through ancient stones and modernity busts through boulevards. You'll just have to tune in.
Ah, always leaving them wanting more, Lara. As for today, though, it's been nothing short of a pleasure sharing the marvels of Rio with you all. Here's hoping you felt the sizzle of its beaches and the rhythm of its streets, just as we have.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this fantastical journey through Rio de Janeiro. And remember, whether you're sipping a Caipirinha or dancing the Samba, keep the Carioca spirit close to your heart.
That's a wrap for today, everyone. We can't wait to whisk you away again next time on Travel with Lara and Luca.
Until then, pack your curiosity, embrace the adventure, and as always, wander more.
Take care, and boa viagem, amigos.